This video is a continuation from the previous video. Okay, and so this was a sunrise shot. One of the things you want to do when you're shooting sunrises and sunsets, and the golden hour that I mentioned in the previous video includes sunrises and sunsets, is the time that is about 30 minutes before sunrise to 30 minutes to an hour after sunrise. About an hour to 30 minutes before sunset, and about half an hour after sunset. And those, it's not officially an hour, as you can tell, I just went over there. It just depends on when the light is golden. I mean, that's really why it's called the golden hour. And there's some latitude because, as I also previously mentioned in another video, the sun is in a different place every minute of every day for a year. So it kind of depends. You kind of have to check it out. So if you're wanting to shoot beautiful landscapes, most people want to shoot sunrise, sunset, a little before, which is twilight, and then after. Because the light during that time of the day is very close to the horizon, and it is diffused by the atmosphere. And you get these long shadows, you get that low contrast that we talked about with reflections, right? Because here you can see the lake. I can see through the water to see these beautiful pebbles in my foreground, these rocks. The sun has started to come up, so there are soft reflections. They're very diffused reflections. They're beautiful. There's not very high contrast in the skies. Create this beautiful soft pastel-y image. It's very blue because the light in the morning is blue, and it's the way it hits. The light at sunset is red because of the way it hits the environment, the atmosphere. And so here I've got the sun's coming up, and it's just started to color the clouds pink a little. They're flat gray before the light hits them. They're flat. If you ever see clouds that have been hit by the moonlight, they'll be kind of gray and light gray. They're sort of gray until the light hits them, and then they start to turn these beautiful colors. There's a little bit of yellow on the horizon, and this just meets all the requirements for a good composition in a landscape photo. It's interesting, and most of all, it makes people feel something. Calm, usually. People like to look at landscape photography and be calmed by it. We only recently the existence of humans have only recently started to live indoors. Nature is part of what we are and where we came from, and so we like to be connected to nature, and we have disconnected ourselves by living in cities. So pictures of nature, and that's why you'll see a lot of them hanging up and why it's so competitive. People love being out in nature, and they love looking at photographs of nature. Let's look at this one. Another one. This is within the golden hour, and it's actually very gold. This is probably close to an hour. No, it's probably about 45 minutes after sunset. So you have a little bit of latitude there, right? The sun had set, and there were no clouds blocking it. Here's the thing about determining whether or not you're going to get a good sunset. You don't always know because you can't see what's beyond the horizon. And whether or not the sun hits the bottom of the clouds in front of you is really contingent upon whether or not other clouds or mountains are blocking it from doing so. And so sometimes you just sort of have to wait and see what's going to happen. Now, if there are no clouds out there, there's no chance of you getting a sky like this. This happened because there were thunderheads moving in from this direction, and the sun was setting in this direction. So there was nothing blocking it from just lighting up the sky. And if the sky is covered in clouds like it is here, it will sometimes create this just beautiful bounced golden light everywhere. And I got lucky that I happened to be in a place with a guy in a boat, so I have a subject, and there's a dock right here. In my foreground, I have the lake, I have the sky, I have this beautiful blue in the background, there are some trees, so I got really lucky. All this happened when I happened to be in this scenic place. Sometimes you go somewhere scenic, nothing. Other times, you'll be in the middle of nowhere to shoot, and you get the most gorgeous sky. Just kind of how it is. Okay, this is black and white. You can do black and white, obviously, with landscape photography. This was all about textures. I've got the texture of the sand, the texture of the sea, the texture of the sky. So I didn't want color in there. It was too much. By taking the color out, the picture could become about all these beautiful textures. There was this red kayak that was becoming the main focal point in the image that I decided I didn't want it to be. It was conflicting. It became the focal point because it was red. So by removing the color and making it dark, it no longer dominated my image. I might want to go back in here and clean some of this shadow up. It's really dark right here. And it does start to become heavy. Might want to clean some of this up. But again, the focus by taking out the color becomes on all this great texture. And the sky and the sand become the dominant natural focal point and not the kayak. Otherwise, this would just be an ad for a kayak. And then that could be perfectly legitimate too. And then since we're looking at boats, this boat, it was in the middle of, Minnesota was my 50th state that I visited. It was a goal of mine when I was a college student to visit all 50 states. And so Minnesota was my last state, and I was at National Park in Minnesota, and I was so far north in the United States that my phone said "Welcome to Canada" when I got there. But I've got this boat on the water, so it creates a subject. The sun was far enough in the sky that I could shoot directly into it without creating some really weird stuff on my camera. It just lit up that single cloud in the sky, and I got this kind of surreal photo out of this. So it meets all the qualifications for good landscape photography. Some would argue it's an ad for a boat and not landscape photography. That's fine. For me, it was landscape photography in the sense that the boat was just a prop. Let's see. I don't want to talk to you about that one yet. Okay, so here's this one was taken sunrise. The sun had just come up. It was just over the horizon there. And I was on the ocean, and this was I'm trying to remember where this was. Somewhere on the East Coast, I believe. I think it could have been, I don't remember. I'm not even remember. Sometimes I traveled so much when I was younger. I camped a lot. And it all just kind of blends together now. But there were these rocks along the ocean. And this beautiful, delicate little flower was growing out of one of the rocks. And, you know, those of you guys who have been to the ocean, it can be a very harsh climate. And the fact that this delicate little flower was growing there just sort of made me want to take its picture and tell its story. And so here it is, growing out of these rocks in this harsh climate at sunrise, and created this nice little photo. And I focused on the flower so that my background went blurry. And speaking of flowers, they can really be not great subject matters for landscape photos, especially in here. This was Smoky Mountain National Park, and there was a foggy morning in the background. It was kind of but the sun was just making some pretty colors in the sky. And as a result, I had these beautiful brown-eyed Susans in the field, and I made them my subject and my foreground. And then my background is the mountain and the sky, and the midground is the field. And so that worked really well. Okay, and continue in the next video.